Well, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for your time today. I'll just kick off by thanking our staff for really putting a lot of time and effort into studying our boards and commissions. So this is almost as much of a history project as it is a prospective and a looking forward project, because this has really been a good opportunity for staff to understand how things were created years ago and how things came to be in the city structure and city government. And so just a nice slide deck today for the commission's consideration as we talk about the future and talk about realigning some of the boards and commissions and committees to the priorities of the city commission. And so this is, Nicole will kick us off here today.
No, she will not. Brenda will.
All right, we'll have.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have Brenda kick us off today. So thank you, though, for your time, commissioners. We appreciate it.
Sorry for the delay. We were just trying to get the table situated. So good morning. Today we will be discussing our social service and art funds along with some of the boards and commissions that correlate with them. As many of you know, Nicole has been working in this space much longer than I have, as I started in engineering and it just moved up to administration. And so you will see me take a little bit more of a backseat because Nicole does have the history and longevity with a lot of this information. And so as we go through our presentation, we will work on kind of updating and defining what is our community development activities and what does that mean and what does that look like? And then what we really want everyone to be thinking about is how does the city of Fargo show up for those community development activities and how do we want to be present? Thank you, sorry. So what we'll have is Nicole will start with the social service and art funds, and then we will follow with a discussion of the boards and commissions. Our goals today are first to give you an understanding of the operations as it relates to the 2026 budget as we start to prepare for that budget and what our recommendations look like, and to understand the challenges related to our advisory boards. As we step back and look to the future, how do we realign our city resources and the revolving community needs, our governance needs, and our taxpayer expectations? And so I'll hand it off to Nicole.
Good morning, and thank you, Brenda. And so as Michael and Brenda mentioned, it's a bit of a history lesson on how we got where we're at today. I've been with the city for 18 years, planning director, starting in 2018. And I look at some of the commissioners here have been around as long as that and have been part of the social service funds as well. But a little bit of where we started in back with Mayor Furness and in that era, there was, some of you have seen this, but there's many requests that come to the city of Fargo as from nonprofit groups, community interest groups, all seeking support for maybe an initiative or an activity or a group thing that they want the city to contribute to or sponsor. And so that started, there are so many of those type of requests that started with an allocation of general fund dollars, a percentage of a mill that would go to the budget. It's a very small, relatively speaking, in the whole city budget. $250,000 would get allocated towards these social service funds. And so in the early 2000s, there was a formalized process with a notice of funding opportunity, a grant application, and a community development committee would look at these dollars and the application process. That community development committee back then consisted of the mayor, the city commission, or the mayor, the city administrator, the planning director, the planning commission chair, and I'm forgetting somebody. Yeah, a school board member. And so it was a very small, multi-peer agency overview that has expanded over time, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. When I became planning director in 18, we, and then moved through some federal rules in 2015, this correlates a bit with how we manage our HUD funds. And so HUD funds are allocations from the federal government that come to the city of Fargo to be allocated. There's a lot of regulations and standards that go with those funds, And so there was our previous leaders saw an alignment with those social service funds, the general fund dollars, with the federal funds to kind of leverage activities moving forward. And we even had philanthropic involvement with Dakota Medical Foundation and Giving Hearts Day. So all of this was, kind of correlating together, networking together towards how we financially show up in these community development space. That started leading to partnerships. So in 2018, the Community Development Committee at the time and the allocations we were receiving started looking at these organizations that we've been giving money to for a long period of time, Charism, YWCA, and we kind of retired, if you will, these larger organizations who are kind of on their own. They, do they really need a small allocation of $10,000 to $15,000 to make their bottom line work? They would argue, yes, they do. They need every dollar of that. But as we look at the greater goal of how we spend, this limited amount of dollars and what we're trying to leverage with HUD funds, we started looking at more strategic partnerships. And so you'll see us talk a little bit today about partners like the Arts Partnership, the Downtown Community Partnership. And what we're starting to use is the term cost avoidance, basically the idea that without these partners, we would be doing the work. And so it's almost like a contractual relationship, if you will. So we used to have a downtown planner, Bob Stein. He retired in 2011, 2012. And instead of hiring another downtown planner, we tried that. And he left and went farming full time. So so part of this discussion a bit is also how we operationalize or organize the planning department. So this is why I'm taking a lead today. Is I'm really interested in two things. One, for you to understand and the public to understand the history of social service funds, look at how we've been doing operations for the last 20 years, and maybe setting a path forward for the next 20 years. Because as I look around my fellow cabinet members, city administrators, et cetera, I'm soon finding out I'm one of the last ones that remember the last 20 years. And so as we have new, maybe people come into office next year, as we look at your request and the looking at line by line with the budget, how is this all working together? And so I just wanted to provide an overview. So today is probably 80%, if you will, overview of how we do things and maybe why they're not working or ways they can be improved. This is really meant for discussion, but today there's a lot for us to share before we can start that discussion. So we may need more meetings or more discussions as part of that. So we like bar charts. So basically we can think about social service and arts fund. That's literally Fund 8540 as I coordinate with our finance department. And we have an allocation that was set aside as a percentage of a mill back in 2005 or 8 or so, that was set as a direct allocation. So 250,000 that went to social services, those would be regranted, and another 150 that would be allocated to arts programming. And a lot of times those were put in the same pot, and all of a sudden we were comparing community service needs like homelessness with doing a new art project. And so trying to compare apples and oranges became really difficult. And so also as part of the Go 2030, we started seeing we needed an arts commission as a result of that. And so as you go into 2018, you start to see an allocation, the green, to service programs where we started. One of the things I failed to mention on CDBG work is some of the activities we started with federal funds. The rules changed in around 2015 to 18, and we realized those funds could no longer be used. And so what we did is shift the dollars from social service funds to service programs. And so that is our special assessment assistance, our snow removal assistance. That was basically a transfer. Instead of regranting, we would do these direct program allocations. And then the blue, in terms of partnerships, those are our partnerships with the Arts Partnership, Indigenous People, or Indigenous Association, Downtown Community Partnership. So as you can see over time, we've become more dependent on partners, less dependent on internal operations. And so that is part of the discussion questions. And really diving into the finer detail, just another way to present this information. So the arts allocation, $150,000 annually. And in the late 90s, that really started as the local arts agency. So that's important to recognize. That's a federal designation. That Lake Agassiz Arts Council turned into the Arts Partnership, still our local arts agency. So when the National Endowment for the Arts, when they're allocating money, that puts the Arts Partnership, that label puts the Arts Partnership eligible to receive those funds. That switched to the Arts Partnership doing a tri-city granting program. So Moorhead, West Fargo do contribute into those dollars. Then in the results of 2020, we switched to the Arts and Culture Commission. We still support the Arts Partnership, but then we also started making our own art, like murals and things. And then in 26, I'm actually proposing in terms of conservation and where we're seeing the trends of our budget going is actually reducing the funds. So still supporting the Arts Partnership, but reducing the funds for the Arts and Culture Commission's work. As we go into social service programs, it's a $250,000 allocation. They started with the allocation of the Community Development Committee doing these grants on a real administrative process. In 2016, and we formalized in 2019, we no longer are doing small grants, so we're no longer doing sponsorships, we're no longer doing small grants. Word is slow to get out to the public about that. We still have organizations that remember back in early 2000s seeking those funds, but typically we are not giving grant sponsorships anymore, and instead really focusing on our partnerships. So I'll go into more detail about how these funds, so this is just a high overview, and what I'd like to do moving forward is go through our line by line review a little bit more detail. So what is community development? That's, I think when I first became director, I sat down with each commissioner at the time and said, how do you define community development? It is an organization, it is a discipline, just like economic development, just like city planning. People get degrees in community development, and it's really about how community organizes with its relationship to city government and governance and public interaction. So if we think about the social infrastructure, just like we have capital infrastructure, we need social infrastructure. And how the city does that is yet to be defined. It needs to evolve than what we do today. So we have partnerships, service programs, and events. And what I started doing based on the feedback I was starting to get about the budget, and towards the end of last year, realizing legislatively things were going to get even tighter, is as well as the durability of my staff, clarity of our work programs, the HUD management is becoming more difficult. I started looking at what review criteria we should use to evaluate the relevancy of how we started doing things 20 years ago. And so I look at things like, is there an alignment with our strategic plans? Plans like Core Neighborhoods Plan, the Arts Master Plan, Go 2030. Do we have the capacity to administer these activities? Is this unique to city government? Is this something only the city government can do, such as, it's really easy when you look at capital infrastructure like water and wastewater and garbage, public safety. That is really the government's job, right? If we didn't do it, it would be privatized and someone else would be doing it. There's certainly examples of that across the country, but when it comes to community development, it is a public-private partnership when we do this work. Are we leveraging external investment? So I'll just quote Beyond Shelter and Dan Madler. They had their big event last week. And but that's a good example where he, as Beyond Shelter, is going and getting funds from all sorts of groups, federal, state, local, all over the country. And we're leveraging, I think his famous ratio is like 19, for every $1 we put in, he's getting another $25. And so it's about that ROI, if you will. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the cost avoidance. And if we didn't do the work, or if someone else could do it, does that mean we're not hiring 5 more people or spending another $1 million? So I'm going to dive into these three groups. So this is where it starts to get a little bit more. So each of these are line items in your budget that you would see in 2026 or 2025 as part of the 26 budget, and that I submitted to. We just had our first budget round one meetings a few weeks ago, and so the special assessment assistance. We spend about $45,000 a year. The way those work is when there is a new special assessment project and a new capital project, the city will send out a notice about their specials. And if there's a little line in there that talks about if you have income needs, income qualified needs, to contact the city of Fargo and we could perhaps help you with that. So it is income qualified. And we allocate $45,000 a year. That is a number that is increasing. We've been doing that since the start of time. It used to be community development block grant funds, federal funds. We can no longer use federal funds for this because of their rules and regulations. And so we use general funds. So that original $250,000 that was going out to the public in small grants instead is being used to support this program. When we look at the snow removal assistance, a lot of people are not aware of this. Again, a program, I'm not sure the exact history, but it's been here since the start of time. CDBG used to support people who were unable and with disabilities and income restricted to remove their snow on their property, with the goal of trying to keep people in their housing as long as possible and to provide emergency access for someone to be able to go to the doctors or the hospital. We started doing a program where we hire a contractor and we remove that snow off their personal property. The catch with this program, while it's a lovely program and it's very much needed in our community, is we're not publicly advertising this program. It's basically through word of mouth and through every year people have to reapply. So whether you're special assessment assistants or snow removal assistants, those recipients are applying back to our office or the engineering office on an annual basis, and we're recertifying them. This year, as we go into a more conservative budget, I'm recommending we perhaps what we're using the term off-ramp, or find a nonprofit, a charity, an organization that could do this. In fact, we're not really good at that fine-tuning, removing snow at that very granular level. We're better at removing snow at a street-wide with a big machine level. And so I think there's ways we can reprogram those dollars. When we look at arts programming, I'm actually proposing we reduce that budget to zero. And that's a really hard thing to say, because for those that know me and been working with me for a long time, I love public art. I love community development. The work we're doing, this is why I became a planner. And so we have started talking a little bit with our Arts and Culture Commission about the need to, we just don't have the staff capacity, as well as could those funds be used for other things in the city. And so we'd like to maybe pause the call for arts projects. Those are things like the murals you see us install, and kind of that direct artist recipient activity. So I'll talk a little bit about partnerships. And the way partnerships started was really with the Arts Legacy, or the Lake Agassiz Regional Council, which is our local arts agency, which is now the Arts Partnership. So we started support with them prior to '95, using social service funds to help with operational as well as small grants. These are grants that go to the Symphony, the Plains Art Museum. There are nonprofit organizations that are seeking support, and I know they're very dependent on those. Similarly, all those organizations used to come to the mayor's office seeking sponsorship, and we established a formal program through the Arts Partnership. Community Land Trust started around 2018. Obviously, Commissioner Strand's a big champion of that, and that became a sponsorship to help support operationally. DC Partnership, this is newer funding. It became a recommendation from the Downtown in Focus study, and again in the Refresh study, where this also includes sponsorship to help program the Broadway Square funds. And this really started, if you think of the DCP as economic development, like a smaller level of economic development at that Broadway downtown level, and the need for overseeing the bid, et cetera. Additional funds go with DCP partnership when it comes to the bid assessment and maintenance that Ben Dow contracts them with. What I'm proposing in the 26 budget is to do some support with the FM Homeless Coalition. And again, in lieu of myself doing as much regional planning on housing and homelessness, Chandler with the FM Homeless Coalition and United Way has really stepped up. And I call it a pay to play by participating through some financial sponsorship that kind of gets me at the meetings, advocating and representing the city of Fargo's point of view and putting some oomph in it, if you will. And then Indigenous Association, that's an organization I'm really proud of. For those that don't know, the Native American Commission used to do picnics, powwows, winter events, a lot of engagement to build community and relationship. And one of the things we're going to start talking about too is how we sponsor those type of activities. We're not event planners. We don't really do this work well. A metro-wide group that can untether from here really helps doing that work. So we support the Indigenous Association as a more transferring the monies that we used for the Sweat Lodge and other groups back in the day to work on the Indigenous Association. Yeah.
Nicole, just you might, I'm guessing on that list we might add Emerging Prairie, which I think was 50,000.
Yeah, so there's a another, do you want to?
Oh, another, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah.
So, so we're going to touch on that. We do have, this slide from when we had talked last year at finance in regards to emerging prairie and then the greater Fargo-Moorhead economic development along with
Youth Works.
Youth Works.
Yep.
And so I think, for this discussion today, we would like to really, in that community area, and then we do need to revisit that next section of funding also that we look at.
Okay.
And then the last bucket, when it comes to how we allocate community development funds, all these programs have a long history. So we, again, as I said, we used to do a bunch of community events. Over the last, I would say 6 to 8 years, we've really narrowed that down to federal holidays, our community-wide events. You'll notice we don't have an allocation suggested for 26 because I think there's still room for discussion on what that could be and how the city wants to show up and be part of the MLK event and the Juneteenth event. Historically, they started as the MLK event started way back in the early 90s through community volunteers. Over time, that's evolved into hiring an event planner and facilitator to be, kind of a community-oriented event. So it's that, as you can see, that balance between community celebration and how the city of Fargo as a brand, as a engaged community connect with these events. So just to kind of put a pause on what I'm seeking from you at some point is wanted to give you a preview of what is being proposed in the 26 budget. And there's room for change. We're somewhat early in the budget process, but what I saw at a cursory review is discontinue the snow removal assistance program and see if we can find a partner in our community to help sponsor that, modify our strategic partnerships, and then pause the call for the public arts program. Again, most of these elements started with previous leadership, previous elected officials, and have carried a nice legacy. It's painful to talk about legacies terminating, but we also understand we need to make room for the future. And so I think
Just one
before we
question.
transition, yes.
So just to be clear, if we discontinue snow removal assistance, if you go by a neighbor's sidewalk and it's not shoveled, a complaint can be filed, and then the city of Fargo then will pay somebody to come to do that, and then the resident will be charged that. Is that correct? And then just me to understand that each resident would be charged somewhere in the basis, $75, $100 if they have their snow removal. So basically, the removal assistance we did was for people low income, more than likely, that didn't, maybe fixed income, and that's who we helped out. You're suggesting perhaps the Boy Scouts or somebody else might take up that charge and help us out and centralize that as a number to call rather than city offices, right? But if they didn't get a shovel, they could be subject to a fine or a call, right? Is that correct?
So we have a couple of things that happens within the city. And so coming from engineering, there's always been kind of a magic line for engineers of private property and public property. And so the sidewalk is in the right of way. And so if, for instance, someone can't get their sidewalk, the snow removed from their sidewalk, whether it's a handicap or they're elderly or they cannot remove that snow, then we, the city, have gone out. Typically there is a complaint and then we see if they can do it. If they can't, we've removed it. In my mind, and then we would special assess, that comes as an assessment, but we still have our special assessment assistant policy. So if that would happen in this case, they could come and say, I have these qualifications, can you help assist with that assessment? The difference here is we're going beyond that public right-of-way and we're going up to driveways, into driveways, up to front steps. And so where can we look to the community of, is there an organization that could assist with people that would like to stay in their homes longer? We want to keep people within their homes. And so how do we work with different community members of helping assist with that area?
Can I just say something? So the cool thing is, I love watching YouTube videos, and so they have people now that do this for free, like mow people's lawns or shovel, and it's a YouTube thing, and so this is just a hypothetical thing. Maybe we can find someone in the Fargo-Moorhead area that would start doing that, because what happens is they do it for free, but they sell ads on their YouTube sites, and so I live a pretty sheltered life, but I love watching it, where they redo these neglected homes and yards, and so this might, I'm just throwing it out there, but I do think your point that you made about this is not terminating this is just moving. People will still be eligible, especially people with issues. Am I summarizing that correctly?
So I think to look at it is, there's what we were doing with this program is going beyond the right-of-way and into the private property side. And so, yes, if we're struggling with sidewalk snow removal or anything like that, we still have a program to assist with that. It's from the sidewalk to the house. And like you said, there are probably options that Nicole and I are not even thinking of,
Right.
Of different areas, people that could
And
come
can I
help.
just add one more thing? The other thing is the planning department. This is the planning department, and they're running all these programs. The planning department should be planning. That should be the primary focus. And a lot of these programs are very worthwhile, but they've been moved in. No, but our planners they have a lot on their plate. And so I guess that's my thing, that I think we should try to focus on the planning department doing planning. But I see a lot of these committees where there's different departments where it applies to a little bit more as well. And I do think there's some combining of some of these that can make them fit a little bit better. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I do think there's some efficiency for almost all of these. All right, I apologize for talking so much, but I do think that's my main point. Thank you.
No, this is really good. This is what we want. We want conversation. And, our last, when we talk about boards and commissions, really the last conversation we had was in February in the governance. So this is really that start of a public conversation on direction for boards and committees.
Yes, and to that point, it's about as much of budget discussion as it is about operation discussion and efficiencies and unmantling, if you will, or dismantling interaction. So I think one of the gaps we have in city government as a whole is this idea of neighborhood services, and where does that neighborhood service element land? And it does touch many different departments, and so how do we cross-coordinate a little bit more with the departments that work at that neighborhood service level space. So as we transition to now talk about boards and commissions, and so as you can see, it's really hard not to talk about social service funds without talking about the boards and commissions because they're so directly linked. And so I do really feel like it's a tipping point of as we go into this new era of planning activities. We're getting ready to do a new land development code. We are restructuring our HUD work, more about that to come. And so as we really think about how we administer these activities in relationship to the boards and commissions is our next topic. So I'll pass it over to Brenda here.
Might I just interject for a moment before you shift over to boards and commissions? I appreciate this conversation about the funding elements of our budget that aren't on all of our radars. What I'm hoping for in the end is a policy that evolves that will address the future boards and administrators. It's policy driven. However we land, wherever we land, I just hope it's policy incorporated into our future.
And I think whether it's policy or guideline, I think everyone would like to see more direction, guide rails, so that expectations are known between whether it's the city or the board and committee. I think everyone is really yearning to have better direction on both sides. Okay, so why are we discussing this now? So I keep saying I'm new to my new role, but I think that's going to have to end pretty soon since I've been there for 2 years. Oh, do you want to?
Just, John, one historic fact is when Furnace is about, for a lot of these areas, he said, let's take 1 mil. And they used to take 1 mil, $250,000 is what a mil was worth. The mill went up in price, and then he said, well, let's do a half a mil. Mill went up to $500,000. That was still $250,000. Mill presently is 800 and something right now. So in theory, what Furnace had is we'd do 1 mil all the way. Well, we've dropped that because it just was way too much money, right? That was the issue. So to your point on policy, we're not tied to anything right now as far as how much we'll put into this. The same economic development, we're not tied to anything. But like EDC will come to us and say to us, we want $100,000 as your part. West Fargo put this in, whatever. Sometimes that's a suggested amount that people give us. But to your point, if we have a policy, then it's easier because multiple groups come to us, want support from the city, and we're not a nonprofit. I mean, that's not our role in a sense. And before, what happened, Nicole went in her story, historically, we had federal money that was given to us that we kind of went, I remember it was like Christmas. We'd do the arts, would come to us and I want it. And our arts person, Dana would help us distribute it, but it always got really like who was really there, and Dan Molly was part of that, and then Dana was part of that. Since that money's gone away, then we have to be policy driven. I agree. So,
Can I ask a question, Mayor? So part of this also is the cap that the legislature put in, the 3% cap, that's going to impact us. And so when you combine that also with the federal reductions, and some we don't even know, we still don't even know what other reductions are coming, That's the other thing. Would you say that's part of this?
Well, yeah, and health is hit hard now because there are some grants that went away, that we have people in place that will go away because the grant went away, and that's unintended consequences of some of these cuts that people are putting in there. But Dave, your point is well made, is that 3% cap really changes, modifies what the city can do, because we just don't have that little margin money that we used to have.
So you were talking about the mills, so they're capping us. And so I think it'd be good at some point to have an explanation of that, what that means to Fargo with our caps and what the mill rate is and what each mill is, because that's what ties into this. I think most people don't quite get that. And so to have a further explanation at some point, I think we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and I think, Michael, you can jump in here. I think what's interesting is, so for the 2 years I've been up there, we've always talked mills, but really with these new rules, you're talking percentages now, not mills. And so you can maybe articulate that a little bit better.
No, I would add, I mean, we're really talking about real dollars now. The mills for years and years and years, and I'll go back to Mayor Furness's time in office, the value of that mill grew, and so too did the city budget, but now it's all about percentages, and it's about staying under hard caps. And so that will be a part of the discussion, is just changing our dictionary and our use of the term mill, because that term still survives, like in the municipal airport statute of Century Code, but then it doesn't apply in others. So we're going to also be talking with the commission about that as we get the budget process underway. But your point's well taken, Commissioner, that we really need to change the way we're thinking about revenue.
Okay, this is really great discussion, and we greatly appreciate it. One of the things as I've been up in my new role for the last couple of years is one of the conversations that continually gets brought up to me is when and how do we create that time and space to review all of our boards and commissions. And so little by little, we've been adding boards and committees throughout the life of the city. And so how do you periodically take that pause and just take a look and do an evaluation? So, as the city grows, we place an increasing the work demand on our staff continues to increase, and we have been continuing to limit that staffing growth with our budget constraints. And so over the last couple of years, and especially over these last couple of weeks, if we've looked through the presentation, Nicole and I have really spent countless hours discussing the following questions, right? We want to be so thoughtful about this discussion, and how do we realign our programs to meet the needs of the community today? And how do we want our boards to be able to show up? How do we streamline and realign and reinvest with purpose? This presentation is really about aligning our investments and engagement with purpose. It's not just a cost savings, but how do we do better governance also? And how do we go from maybe advisory to more of a strategic community partnership? So how do we lift up our partners in the community to be able to provide that strategic look? So with the slide handouts, we also handed out the white paper that Nicole and I had assembled for your February governance meeting. We've updated the document to show you which boards and committees are we talking about today. These are advisory boards that are non-mandated, and they're connected to our discussion on our community development activities. This is just a portion of our boards and committees. And as we've talked about, we will continue to have those streamlined discussions. We've had multiple conversations about the land development code. We know that there is going to be more discussion and streamlining with these boards and committees. Oh, I suppose I could talk.
So the boards we're going to be talking about today with a little bit more detail are the ones you see on the slide here. Since a lot of them sit with the planning department or have history with the planning department, I've offered to work collaboratively with Brenda and as we talk about what we want for future. And so a little bit of how some of the, again, similar processes with social service funds, looking at an evaluation criteria of recommendations. A little bit of the history of how some of these boards began. It's a little bit all over the place in terms of timeline, but really a lot of them started in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And one thing that they have in common is they were championed or spearheaded by a champion, an elected official, or some other community need or initiative. As Brenda said, those initiatives would start, but we never really sunsetted some of that activity work. So it'd be like the convention center, if we were never to table that item after the convention center projectedly got built, we never kept meeting, and maybe they will keep meeting. But so the Arts and Culture Commission started as a result of Go 2030. A lot of engaged citizens as part of that saying they want more public art and methods on doing that. Same with the sustainability and resiliency. All of Go 2030 has a energy conservation alignment with it. Community development really started as the allocation of social service funds and to set the HUD strategy. The Fargo Youth Initiative was championed by Commissioner Melissa Sobolik at the time, really for policy development and engaging with youth leaders. The Human Rights / Human Relations Commission really started as community relationships, education. They used to do a lot of community picnics and ice cream socials at the neighborhood level, work of that nature, as well as take on hard topics like the 10 Commandments at City Hall, which is a sore subject. The Native American Commission really started as an impetus due to better relationship building with indigenous populations, especially with the police department and other civil justice aspects. The Parking Commission started as overseeing downtown parking, both on-street and facility. And the police oversight, I think most of us were here when that began as in the summer of 2020 with some of the civil unrest. So when we look at the current status of these boards and commissions, we look at its alignment to the policies we have internally. Are these boards that are advocacy in nature? So a lot of volunteers will, we have a lot of great volunteers. I think at one point, if all of these boards met monthly, we'd be working with over 90 volunteers a month. And so, which is a heavy lift. But a lot of volunteers step up for advocacy, right? They are knowledgeable, they have the deep education on the topic, and they want to provide that service to the city, which is fantastic. However, we're missing some mission alignment on what are we doing with this information, or how does it integrate with deeper work at the city level, at the different department level, the expertise. And so some of these were really built about how do we learn more about these topics. Back when some of these boards started, we did not have a regional approach, so right now, like for instance, there's a statewide human rights coalition. And so some of these are local needs and some of these are regional and statewide needs. And so as we evaluate the alignment, if you will, of government, local application and what we're doing, I think this chart basically shows how we started and maybe a misalignment and how we do the work moving forward. So similar to the social service funds, I prepared, working with our staff, a framework to review, kind of the capacity as well as should some of these be internal facing or external facing, government or community organized, and are these strategic in nature? That led to recommendations of staying as is, status quo, slimming down, or maybe clarifying expectations. Is that what we need? Or do we want to realign or off-ramp what we call, evolve into a more regional discussion? So a little bit more about our findings. I think one aspect is the need for, as Brenda mentioned, strategic partners as opposed to advisory. I think some of the frustration that we hear from our volunteers and boards is that they have advice to give us, but we don't have the resources to implement their advice in nature. Arts Commission is an example of that. We have a public art master plan that says we should have 4 more staff and $700,000 allocation to really run a public art program, and where we, the city, are putting art pieces, our art installations in our public space, our public realm. Obviously, that doesn't fit in our city budget as a whole. And so it's a bit of the master plan needing evaluation or redo, or we have a different revenue source that we can find somewhere. So transitioning from advisory to strategics partnerships, really what we're trying to do is allow those important topics to happen, but can we unbundle that from the governance legacy? So when we talk about the governance process, we're talking about, just like the white paper says, you know, the public meeting requirements, the notices, the agendas, the quorum setting, and that rigor of government, you know, bureaucracy is not really aligning with the advocacy and organic nature of building relationships. You know, most of these boards started about building relationships and learning more about the community, which me and my team do and other departments do in organic nature. And so how do we implement that organic nature as opposed to a really formalized process in terms of a mandated monthly meeting? So that led us to, you know, kind of, do we have a group of boards and commissions that we conclude our table so that we can free the staff to do the work instead of administrating a process? So how do we free the volunteers and advocates to build organic relationships? Still have that city commission oversight on important topics, have a liaison commissioner, have more flexibility. And I'll use the Native American Commission as an example. You know, last 2 weeks ago, Chief Zabowski, Commissioner Strand, and our chair and vice chair of the Native American Commission met to talk about a really important topic, missing and murdered Indigenous people, and how can we organically work in with resources that we have to really make sure we're all talking about the same thing in terms of administrating. We didn't need, in my mind, a 5 p.m. meeting on the dais to talk about this in a formal presentation. It was just a small meeting in the Meadowlark room that will turn into a more formal presentation, but how do we work organically and relieve some of this administrative process? And then how do we reduce repeated conversations to receive clarity and action faster? So as you can see, this is really about the governance aligning and the processes aligning. So for instance, there was a time I was managing on the same month and the same week, a Fargo Youth Initiative meeting, a Native American Commission meeting, an Arts and Culture Commission meeting, an HRC Commission meeting, and a City Commission meeting, and a Planning Commission meeting. All 6 of those boards would have the same agenda topic with the same recommendation, and I would just rinse and repeat, to the point that we're operationalizing a storyboard as opposed to doing the work. And so that's where we started so over the course of the last several years, we've already been streamlining, going to quarterly meetings, having less frequent meetings, canceling if we don't have action. And I think what I'm saying is those aren't enough until we go into our next list of recommendations with more clarity. This is where I'm seeking the public's input, your input on how can we really, because I'm not getting more staff and I'm not getting more funds in the near future. And so how do we really streamline so that we can operationalize this work in a deeper level besides just the planning department and the planning director's role? My staff, for instance, are busy doing other work. And so to manage the volunteers, I wouldn't say they need managing, but to engage with the volunteers to a level of sophistication and excellence that they need requires an administrator or a planning director assistance. You know, Mayor Mahoney, you'll remember when it was our interns managing these boards and commissions. And this work is just too complicated and too deep for interns to be managing unless we're going to be really organic in nature. Otherwise, the way it works is, the intern and the board member have some really great ideas, really fantastic ideas. They come to me and I say no because we don't have the funds or it's not in our work plan. And what does that do? It then adds to, disgruntled and unhappy people if we keep doing that. So how do we set those expectations clearly initially? So what you see in front of us is, a matrix, if you will, that analyzes based on those topics with a recommendation to work with our Arts Commission, Native American Commission, Human Rights Commission, and the Fargo Youth Commission to talk about how do we off-ramp this, work with the executive committee members to figure out if there's a better way to be doing this governance and involvement so we can have more organic community relationships. So again, just to bring the topic home, I think what we found is how do we really focus our organization to a broader regional community with statewide support. Right now, we have these resources in arts, indigenous, cultural guidance, civil rights, and youth leadership that don't need to be just at the city of Fargo, that they could be broader at a statewide, regional level where we're a member or we're a partner, but we're not leading the discussion. And then, but still have access. So we're lucky that all of you as city commissioners have direct contact. People talk to you, call you, email you on a frequent basis. They email, call me, talk to me on a frequent basis. I'm sure they reach out to all of our other directors as well. We have a very fluid communication. And so do we need the structure of a dais and a set established meeting minutes, process? Can we have unleash, from that bureaucratic governance of open meeting laws and Robert's rules, releasing some of Nancy's guidance and guardianship on that topic as we move into more doing what I call doing the work. And so in essence, I'll turn it over to Brenda, but that concludes our presentation and really open for discussion. We realize many of you are hearing this for the first time. Our public's hearing this for the first time, but we have been starting to talk with our board and commission volunteers that this is coming and that there's a need for change.
And so I'd say even after our February governance meeting, there was discussion with our boards and commissions of what was coming. And, I've just been working with HRC since last fall. So that's been a new great experience for me. And just listening and learning from that committee also has been, it's been able to see where we are struggling as a city and how do we try and take that pause and just evaluate how can we do this better. And so like Nicole said, this really is our first step to talk about this publicly. We look forward to getting your feedback and hearing back from our commissioners on your thoughts. And then also, working with our executive boards of our committees on what their thoughts are. And so gathering that feedback on what does the right path forward really look like for each board and commission, because each path might be a little bit different. And so what we can be looking at is, just that evaluation framework. What are your thoughts? We'll want to hear from you on, if you think we've headed down the right path. And then we'll work with our executive committees. And then also, we do have those boards and commissions. Some of them aren't meeting and some we are looking to conclude. And so we can bring that forward to the city commission, but we are continuing to evaluate. We have all of the boards and commissions to be looking at. And that's what you're going to see us doing as we move forward.
It seems that park and community development could be taken care of at the next meeting because they don't meet anyway, so there's no reason to continue them. I think, Chief, are you on police oversight? Or that group seems that it would theoretically be okay, but are you saying you want to meet with them first before that would come forth?
So our recommendation on the police and oversight and sustainability would be to conclude.
conclude them as well. And Chief, you
Yes.
feel that that would work out okay with your group?
What I hear our board saying is that they would continue to be interested in working with the police department, but not in a formalized setting, as we currently have.
And that's partially because the reasons Nicole was talking about, they can't meet and talk and visit because they're kind of sustained by rules of majority, and they kind of feel they want to get together and visit and be more like an advisory, but not held to the formal rules. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And John, sustainability, you had great work, great things coming out of there. Are you thinking maybe in the future, if we need to meet on that, if we just have a brown bag or a
That's
town
fine.
hall to do that? But I mean, you've done a lot of stuff on that committee.
You know, we, like another board without any funding, without much, Bruce Grubb is our person. You know, we bring in department heads from 10 or more departments every time we meet and take them out of their job. And it's hard to, and even in today's world, you can't even hardly even say the word resiliency without drawing attention to yourself. So my sense is we put it on hold and we see what surfaces in the future. I feel that way about a lot of these activities, but that's my sense. I know there's interest in the community, and it's a letdown to the folks who want a focus on those topics, but it's a different world today.
And I think one thing Nicole and I've been talking about, all of this work is still very important to all of us. It's just, what is that right path forward? So you look at sustainability and all the staff members that are there. Becky with facilities is constantly looking at, what can we do better? How can we replace things? How can we be more sustainable? Engineering and our stormwater ponds, we're always looking at what we can do. That work isn't going away. We're going to continue to do that work each and every day. And so it's just, how do we be present in that place? Do we need a board and committee, or can we just keep doing that work?
Just a couple things. You mind if I go first? The first is, I think it's great to review all these things, but I do have some concerns, like with art. Sometimes we're eligible for these grants. Is there still a way that we can continue that? Because we don't want to miss out on that, I guess. And can you just give us an example of how that would still work?
No, that's a great question. Absolutely. So to Brenda's point, we still very much care about this work. So you'll remember the Fargo project and the pond we did. We did that work outside the Arts and Culture Commission. And, and so we definitely need those experts in our community that we would reach out to as an initiative or as a topic, but to have that review, we just don't have enough work for them to be analyzing on a monthly basis.
Just a couple more things. The other thing is, a lot of these, there's people on these different boards that still want to be active in the city. And so I think it's very important that no matter which one of these, show them the other opportunities that we still want them to be involved. And so to give them options, saying, like you said, the work isn't going to discontinue, but here's how you can still be involved. And so I do think that would be important for all these, just to show them if that makes sense to you. And then one specific thing, so the parking, so to me, the ramps, and there's lots of financial things that go on there. And so I don't know what your vision is, but to me, to put that in the finance committee minutes or something like that, just so we're all because and parking ramps take a lot of maintenance, and anyway, and there's revenue from, and just all the things. I don't want that lost, as I'm sure Don doesn't want some of the things lost in the sustainability. You want those things, but so I'm sure you're going to come forward with a plan, but just if you don't mind doing that, saying, here's where it's going to be covered in the future.
No, I think that's a good record. Sorry, Mary.
I just think that's a great idea, because we
Yeah.
lose sight of parking, and that's really what the Park Commission used to look at: rates, where we park, how to do things, do different things, but let all the commissioners be aware of that, because otherwise that'll be lost. We won't know where it is. I think John one day asked, how much are we making in the parking ramps? It's good to have it in front of us in a quarterly fashion and look at it. So Susan's not here today, Michael, but I think that's a great suggestion, at least she's in the back. So if we could do that, and I know it's a little complex with your new computer, or who's that guy, that friendly guy that sets us up? Okay, we could get it from him, but okay.
Can I just add one more thing, Mayor? The other thing, not to add to, when you're talking about reducing to add, but so now we have the Fargo Dome, a convention center, and the Civic Center. Those are all things that are all similar. And so I don't know going forward how that's what the governing body is going to be for the convention center, to be an example, but we have to have something down the road for that. How will that be? Anyway, so I apologize for adding things to the agenda, but I do think that's something, and I like the concept of, there's lots of these boards where we can still incorporate what these things are, just in a different way, and so thank you. All right, I rambled too much.
Sternberg and then Kolpak.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I think what we're getting to the core of is government efficiency. That you, Nicole, were at 6 additional meetings in a week. I mean, how many hours a week are you putting in? That's crazy. So needing to streamline and become more efficient, because do every one of these listed on the sheet of paper cost time and money? I mean, we're broadcasting, people are being taken away from their full-time jobs. And the city of Fargo is home to 1,300 nonprofits. 1,300 just in Fargo. That employs over 16,400 people, generates $1.9 billion in annual revenue, holding $3.8 billion in assets. Moorhead has approximately 203 nonprofits. I just think the city itself can't be everything to everyone. We don't have the money, we don't have the time. Commissioner Strand has a devious grin on his face, but we don't have an endless pot of money. We just don't. I mean, looking at some of the things we spend on, can't we not hand some of this over to nonprofits? Collaborate with them, so maybe they're taking it and it's not incumbent upon the city to fund everything? That's just my input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple comments. The first is I very much appreciate you're going to include the members of the commissions and boards as part of the input process. They've all given their time, and I can tell you the members of the Arts and Culture and also the Youth Initiative are very excited to be part of both of those efforts and have been working really hard. And so we have 2 good meetings with both of those groups already about these topics. There's clearly understanding of the need for change and growth, but part of that growth comes from the good work that they've done so far, and now it's time to evaluate that good work and how we keep it sustainable, especially when I think about the work of the Arts and Culture Commission. So, but getting their input to me is showing them the respect that they deserve. I also think it reinforces the need for the overarching list of strategic priorities. That should be one of the criterion that's part of the evaluation of an existing board and commission and what that looks like. And I'll just to clarify, in addition to the overall consistency and governance that will be part of this work, being really, really clear on the purpose of each board and commission and their scope of work. Sometimes we've gotten outside of the guide rails to some of your earlier comments, and it's created more problems in the city than what they're hoping to help the city with. And so I would really appreciate that overarching list of strategic priorities as part of the work and part of the budgeting process we've already talked about.
Can I add one thing real quick? Nicole did this, that each planning commission meeting costs around $7,000. And so, you did a good job of summarizing, if you add up all these meetings and all the hours, it's a lot. It's a lot of, and especially if a lot of these things can be covered with a less meeting and still cover the same thing. So I do think efficiency is a great thing. You also want the people that are volunteering their time to feel like they're accomplishing something instead of just meeting to meet. And so I thank you for all this. I think it's great. And so, and I'm glad, I think like you said, this is just the initial introduction. And so we'll have lots of conversation. We're all in all these committees. And so we'll have lots of opportunity to share with all the people on the committees how important they are. So thank you.
Some thoughts, and this is really a ripe topic that's so overdue for us to address, and a lot of times in life, we end up doing what we've been doing just because we've always been doing it. And isn't that the definition of insanity? to expect a different result when you're doing everything the same, you know, but this is, and then a lot of times I'd also wonder if we started with a blank slate, what would we do today versus what we've inherited that others have done in the past? And we have a lot of topics in our community that would really be benefiting from focused effort, you know, housing and public safety and health, employee retention and recruitment, neighborhoods. I think we could have a whole new foray into neighborhood leaders and so on, and some of these community engagement. Some people would say a charter commission. Maybe we start down the road having ad hoc commissions for a year or two to focus on today's current momentary needs. But either way, it's really valuable to pull in our belts and not be spending efforts on things that just the result is not what we all want. And we want to respect the engagement of the time of the people. One last thought is a couple thoughts. Moving stuff out of planning into administration, if we go forward, we don't want our planning department to be the caretaker of all these boards and commissions. It just doesn't make sense today. Another thought in my mind is, as we make this sausage, we may not need 6 commissioners down the road if we cut out 10 or so boards and commissions that we're all assigned to and meeting in and attending to. So that might reduce our own demands internally and with our administrative roles, and we may decide that 4 is adequate. I don't know. It's another consideration here, but thank you guys for this work you're doing and for making this. Lastly, we need to be relevant. Whatever we do, we need to be relevant and contemporary.
Thanks for all your hard work for 7 minutes over time, but you did a great job, and we've had great discussion today. I think that's what the commission needed to do, to ventilate this and get it through. And let's just move to the action items and finish what you need to do, probably in a timely fashion, if you wouldn't mind, because it'd be nice to have our volunteers kind of know what's going on and what we know is going on. So, good report. Mike, any closing things, or?
No, just really appreciate your time. We knew that it would take just this kind of a meeting, some dedicated time. We had to unpack a lot of history, and these are all good intentions, obviously from that era of the 90s and the 2000s, really good intentions. You know, I can picture Mayors Lanning and Furness at the time, and the communities really talking about at that time some of these things, and that's okay to move on and to pivot to other things. And so just really appreciate your enthusiastic support for trying to think a little bit different and really trying to help us do the best work we can for these citizens, volunteers. Commissioner's comment is spot on. We really need to thank and acknowledge these people because they've given a lot of time and a lot of effort over these years. And so how do we thank them, but then also show them other opportunities to stay involved with their government and their community. So thank you very much.